essentially, the idea behind customer segmentation is that the products and services sold by companies does not really solve the needs of every particular customer out there. So all solutions don't fit all. So companies need to figure out which part of the overall customer base will resonate with the solutions they develop, and only target them so that they have a maximum ROI on their marketing activities. So application of analytics in customer segmentation ranges from a simple quantile based grouping all together towards unsupervised machine learning, which is a more advanced technique. The next step where analytics has a role to play is customer targeting. So once we form different groups of customers, which we call customer segments, we determine whom to sell the company's product and services. So not all segments are targeted by companies often. And essentially, in determining which segments to target, there is a lot of analytics involved, which tries to estimate a particular purchase probability of a segment, revenue potential, how much revenue can this segment give the company, and is catering to the segment particularly profitable. And once customer segmentation and targeting got done, the third process we have is marketing promotions. This involved the typical advertising that each one of us comes across, on our day-to-day life. So essentially, the analytics helps in figuring out what is the budget allocation across different promotional activities. Like you have TV ads, you have banner ads, internet ads, and then we have SMS, email, and you have door-to-door selling and all of that. So analytics used in marketing promotions essentially determines how much budget needs to be allocated and how these different analytics and how these different promotional campaigns have to be sequenced. And it also helps to close the loop based on measuring the effectiveness of each of the campaigns that are run during the promotional activities. All right, thanks. So the first use case of analytics in sales promotions that I would want to introduce is what you see on your screen. So we have a business scenario here where a particular company called Company X runs different promotional or advertising campaigns across 3 different channels. Like they use telemarketing to reach customers, they use emails, as well as they use SMS. The CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer of this company, wants to understand which channels work with customers, and thereby he also wants to understand to stop spending in the inefficient channels. So we have a sample data on our screen where the rows in the table represent different customers, and the columns, and the first column is an identifier column where we have customer A, B, C, and so on. And then we have customer segment. We have 2 segments here. We've classified a customer into an urban customer who's living in a city, young, probably aged under 30, 35. And then you have a suburban middle-aged customer who sorts of lives in tier 3 or tier 4 towns, is more middle-aged in 40s or 50s. Now, the company X has run different marketing campaigns like sending emails, sending SMSs, and sending and calling over a telephone in their last business cycle, last 1 month or so, and they have gathered data on the same. So if you look at the data, we have emails sent. They've at least sent 10 emails per customer. And they've also captured how many emails that each customer has seen. For example, customer A has seen 5 emails out of the 10 that was sent, and customer C has seen 4 emails out of the 10 that was sent. Similarly on SMS, SMS sent and SMS seen. And similarly on the telephonic calls. the number of telephonic calls made in the last month, and how many of them have been answered by customers. So based on this data, we can actually try to understand how effective each of the channels has been, and then try and figure out what could be the next best action for the CMO to see if there is any scope to reduce the spending any of these in inefficient channels. I'll just move on to the next slide. If you look at the table on the left here, I've just summed up the sample data that we've seen in the previous slide. So if you look at the total number of emails sent, that comes out to be 50. While the total number of emails that I've seen are only 11 across the entire customer base that have been identified. Similarly, on SMS, we have 30 SMSs sent. Only 16 have been seen. And telecalls, similarly, we have 8 telephonic calls answered out of the 15 that were made by the company. Now, in order to measure effectiveness, if we look at the plan versus the actual activity, it's a simple ratio of 11 by 50, 16 by 30, and 8 by 50. We would see that the emails attainment or email effectiveness is only 22%, while the SMS and telecalls are 53% each. So just by looking at this summary, it is not very difficult to conclude that only, emails have been the least effective channel, while SMSs and telecalls have been performing in a better across the customers. But another important caveat here is to look at this breakup by different customer segments. So if you recall, the sample data in the previous slide, right here. So we have something called customer segment, and we have two segments: urban young and suburban middle-aged. Now, if you look at the all-up summary here, we see that emails are the least effective channel. Only 22% are successful, while the rest of the channels like SMS and telecalls are performing better. But the story is actually different when you break down by customer segments. So we'll try to look, if we try to look at the email effectiveness across urban young and suburban middle-aged, we'll notice that email has been performing much better in case of suburban young as opposed to suburban middle-aged. So we see that 9 out of 20 emails, that is 45% of the emails, have been viewed amongst urban young, while suburban middle-aged has only viewed 7%. And this is actually, the story is actually different when you look at SMS. So SMS, if you look at urban young, only 8% of them have viewed, while suburban middle-aged have viewed 83%. So just looking at these two tables side by side, the conclusion that we want to send that we want to draw is that email looks like an ineffective channel if we look at all of summary of the sample data. But the actual point, the actual situation, ground situation is that it is not working with the suburban middle-aged class, while it is working well with the urban young class. Similarly, if you look at SMS, SMS does not work well with the urban young class, but SMS works better with suburban middle-aged class. So essentially, this demonstrates the fact that your one solution doesn't fit all. When you're looking at sales data or promotional data, it is quite important to look at by customer segment, rather than just looking at the all-up summary sample data. So if you were just looking at the all-up summary of the sample data, we would be concluding that emails are ineffective, so we can stop sending emails. While actually you have a certain segment of audience who are very receptive to emails and not receptive to SMS. So the point I wanted to drive is, in business analytics, customer centricity is at the center of the solutions of the analytics that we do. It's always important to bring that customer perspective into the analytics that you're doing, to just understand to just demonstrate the fact that one solution does not fit everyone, and you will have to cater your processes, products, or services based on customer needs and customer behaviors. So I'll just pause here for a couple of minutes to see if anyone has any question before we move on to the next case.
Actually, Rohit, I have a question here. So when
Mhm,
we have multiple channels, so do
mhm.
you suggest to understand which channel is working for which segment? We'll have to try and test everything.
So when you're doing it for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
you typically have some qualitative knowledge,
Yes.
which you use for budget. And that evolves over time. Yeah, first time you're not very optimal when in your spending. Your ROIs are very small,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll also see that a lot of your attainment metrics are very poor. But over time, as you evolve in 2 or 3 business cycles, you will understand that eventually what works out for what customer and what works out for the products or services that you see.
I have a question. My name is
Yes,
Anupam.
Anupam.
Uh, Actually, sir, you said that the urban young attachment is only 8% through SMS, right?
Mhm.
So, what if the 8% people bring business to your company? What would you do in such case?
That's a fantastic point. So your segmentation is not a single dimension always. For the illustration purpose, I've just made it simple and made it look like a single dimension. But your customer segmentation is always considered something called customer revenue potential or customer lifetime value. So in a real time, in a real time scenario, you would not be just be looking at demographics like urban young or suburban middle age. You'll also look at something called revenue potential, and that becomes the second criterion for customer segmentation. In fact, not just revenue potential. There are other criterion like profitability. Sometimes you will have customers who buy a lot of your products and services, but it's just not profitable to sell. So there are, if you were to extend this thought process to a real-time scenario, customer segmentation itself is a very complicated process. That itself uses a lot of analytics, but completely acknowledged, the volume of business that needs to be brought in by every segment should also be looked at while you're doing this sort of exercise. And another metric that we'll also look at along with the attainment is the ROI, right? So if you have a segment that is bringing larger volume of business with very less investment into the marketing channels, we always try to focus on those on that particular segment. So yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, the volume of business that is driven by each of these segments is an important criteria that is looked when you do these things real time.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Great, thanks. The second use case I'd like to introduce is something called levers of uh, advertising campaign reach. Again, a business scenario here is that we have a company A which engages a very traditional method of sales and marketing, that is sending sales representatives to door to sell their products. And there is a notion in the leadership that the sales representatives are underperforming, and the leadership of the company wants to understand the reasons behind the scene. So that's the problem statement that a typical business analyst in a company would get. So essentially, I would like to demonstrate a 4-step solution approach of how to go about answering the question that we have here. So if you look at the business scenario again, the core question that we are trying to answer here is, um, what is the reason for underperformance, or what is the, why does leadership have this feeling that sales representatives are underperforming? Before we actually get into the solution, in these type of problems where, the problem statement itself is very abstract and not not very uh, not very intuitive. It's very important that as a business analyst, we need to break down different components of the problem. So if you look at the problem statement, some of the keywords that I would be focusing on is underperforming and the reasons behind this. So before we actually jump into why underperformance, the first step is actually to define what is performance in this scenario. So in order to analyze performance better, we actually need to, the first step is to attach a metric to an abstract term. So possible performance metrics in case of sales representatives going, selling door to door is the average touch points per customer. How many customers have we been successfully able to talk to? And if there is a plan that has been given to them, like deliver, X number of sales calls on the field in a week. Another good metric that we would like to look at is the average attainment. So if you're looking at it per quarter, then it will be average attainment per quarter. It can be looked at smaller business cycles as well. Now, once we define performance in terms of metrics, the second step is to actually establish benchmark, where we try and answer what is underperformance. So let me say if you have 8 touch points a day per customer, per rep, we do not really know, just by looking at the number 8, we would not really know whether that is, an underperformance or an overperformance. So a better way to gauge this is to actually establish something called a benchmark. So in this step, what we would do is touch points per customer. We would look at the average touch points per customer for company A, and also measure the same metric for different competitors in the so that we would understand how reps from company A are performing against reps from the different competitors in the market. And if the industry average or the market average is much greater than 8, only then we should accept the notion that reps from company A are underperforming. If the number of touch points delivered by each rep is closer to 8, then it's not really it cannot be really established from the data that the reps from company A are underperforming. So an important aspect in question like this, where some diagnosis or root cause or reasons is involved, is that it's necessary that we establish a benchmark which is accepted across the competitors and the market in order to actually discard or accept the idea of underperformance in general. The third step is when we actually come up with possible reasons of underperformance, wherein we deeply study the operating landscape of different sales representatives from from company A and other competitors, and hypothesize the possible causes of underperformance. Step 3 is hard to do. It actually involves a very good understanding of how door-to-door selling works, why particular competitors in the market or particular reps in the market are able to do better than the others versus the ones who are not doing better. And it is actually, most of the time, it is actually important that you do this in teams and groups, involve your clients, involve your leaders and managers to actually come up with possible or probable causes of why a metric of why the performance is lower, why average touch points per customer or the average attainment would be lower for a particular company. And the last step is actually where data analysis comes into the picture. Once we have a list of probable causes, we actually try to gather the data that will help us to prove or disprove those hypotheses. And this actually uses descriptive and advanced statistical techniques. So if you look at the 4-step process that a business analyst would be following to answer a question like this, You would notice that data is only one step of the entire solution process. The other three steps is actually defining what metric you would want to look at, and establishing a benchmark, and then generating possible causes of why your metric would be lesser or higher than the benchmark. So the critical part of business analyst job is not just doing data analysis, but also try and understand the business landscape and do that problem breakdown so that there is a structured method to solve that problem. We'll just move on to what we what could be a possible hypothesis. While we can't do this exercise right now, breaking down the problem, doing benchmarking and all of that, I'd like to inform you that this was a real life case. Essentially, when I was working for a consulting firm, a client had a problem with underperformance in terms of number of touch points that their reps are able to deliver. And we followed the 4-step process, which actually led us to a series of probable causes, out of which two of the hypotheses came out to be true when we did some descriptive data analysis. Essentially, the hypothesis that came out to be true, or companies who were aligning 2 or more reps to a customer were enjoying higher average touch points per customer. Essentially, if you have alignment here actually means if you're sending more than one rep from your company to meet a customer, it's likely that your reps will be able to enjoy higher averages. So it is 2 people from the same company trying to meet one person. So that was working out well in the industry, and that is called layering. So the companies which were practicing layering were actually able to enjoy twice as much as the companies which were not practicing layering. And similarly, we have companies which sort of guide their reps to carry more than one product during their visit. Essentially, if you are, if you have multiple brands or even multiple product lines, these companies have cross-trained reps so that they can market more than one product in a particular visit. So so that practice is called bundling. And essentially, the companies that were practicing bundling were enjoying higher number of touch points, about 1.5 times on average, than the companies which were not practicing. So layering and bundling were essentially the two hypotheses that came out to be true in the real world when we actually followed the 4-step process. And if you look at the data part of it, it's quite simple. It's just a bar chart with 2 averages. But the hard part of solving this problem is to actually define a metric, set a benchmark for that metric, and actually drive the probable causes through a groupthink or a brainstorming session with different stakeholders that are involved. So that's the core part of business analyst job in scenarios like this, where data has a role to play, but it is only one step of the solution. But the major chunk of, or the major lion's share of building that solution is to actually look at the business landscape and come up with possible or probable causes, and then move on to data to test. Yeah, the third use case I would want to introduce is the performance measurement part of business analytics. And it would be interesting to see how this works out in a B2B environment. So if you were to think of businesses, you can broadly classify them into either B2C, consumer goods companies, who sell things to individuals like us. And the other way in which businesses can be classified is B2B, where, a business actually sells their products or services to another business. So In sales, essentially, if you were to look or talk about the uh, sales of a B2B company, unlike a consumer goods company where products and services are directly sold to individuals like you and me, in a B2B environment, uh, products and services are sold through a series of events, which constitutes or which we call as sales pipeline. So it's not like, I walk into a store, purchase a mobile phone or purchase, an electronic gadget. A B2B sales actually is a series of a series of activities that happen on both the customer end as well as the seller end, which finally culminates into a contract or a deal. Typical example of a B2B selling process is what companies like IT services do, like Infosys, TCS, how they sell their products and services to clients across the world. Um, in order to actually understand how to measure sales performance in a B2B environment, it's quite important that we understand the series of events involved in the sales process, or what we call as a sales cycle. So I've tried to portray a very simplistic view of processes and sales pipeline. The step one involved in sales pipeline is to generate business opportunities. And your sales team is essentially responsible to do this. It involves uh, identifying potential opportunities across clients through queries, requests, emails, or even events, sales calls, presentations. The sales guys actually visit clients, run these presentations, and then identify if at all there is any traction for the company's products and services that they are selling. Once this generation phase is through, uh, the sales team actually gets into something called evaluation phase. So once you have, say, 15 or 20 opportunities for a particular month, the next step in the sales process is to actually evaluate which ones will work out. And essentially, and it is not an uncommon phenomenon to see that most of the opportunities that are generated in the generation phase actually don't convert. So they get dropped off over the course of time, and clients who said that they are interested to do business in this month may change their minds in the next 2 or 3 months. So it's essential that the sales team doesn't go after or chase after every potential business opportunity that they find. It's important that they evaluate the list of opportunities they have. Once the evaluation process is done, step three is to scope the opportunities. So this involves visiting the clients, deeply studying what the problem is, figuring out if the current product suite of the company actually solves that solution, and make a proposal accordingly to the clients, and get the contracts and the statement of work. The right term for contract and B2B is statement of work, and get the statement of work drafted. So once step three is done, a lot of paperwork would be involved there. Once step three is done, the final step four is where price negotiation happens. So there's nothing called a concept of MRP that exists in B2B, unlike B2C. There is always a price negotiation between the client and the customer. And once the prices are settled, the final contracts are drafted and signed, wherein which is what termed as a closure of the opportunity. Essentially, that's when the delivery of the project is expected to start. So the sales process in a B2B involves these four steps. And on the next part of this, I have an idea. I tried to present an idea here on how sales performance in this sort of a B2B sales process can be measured. So typically, in order to measure performance in B2B, we define performance metrics for the sales pipeline. And the four pillars across which performance is measured in any B2B setup is win rate, which gives you an idea of how many opportunities in your that were identified in the generation phase have actually been converted. And then you have average opportunity size, which is the average revenue of the opportunities you have converted. And then you have ROI, which is a very critical metric. Essentially, is the revenue of the opportunities and the expenditure incurred so far in closed opportunities. So if you recall the four-step process we spoke about in the sales pipeline, there is a lot of expenditure that a particular company who's selling to client incurs in order to even close this opportunity. So and the client most of the time doesn't pay for these things. So it's upon the company who's selling these products and services to incur that expenditure, and it is critical to measure the ROI expenditure. And the last pillar of performance in B2B is the average pipeline velocity. Essentially, the average number of days between the generation phase and the closure phase for the opportunities that have. So these are the four pillars of performance in a B2B, unlike B2C, where the metrics are slightly different. If you are doing sales performance or sales analytics in B2B, the discussion is always around four of these. And I have a small sample data to demonstrate these metrics. So you have, let me say, you have identified 3 opportunities. You have won 2 of them, lost 1 of them. There is a certain opportunity revenue that is associated with each of these. And there is certain expenditure that is involved in converting these, and the number of days spent as well. This is how a typical sales pipeline data would look in a B2B environment. So if you were to calculate these 4 metrics for this sample data here, this is how the numbers would look like. So your win rate, which is 66%, because you have won 2 out of 3 opportunities. Your average opportunity size, essentially, you calculate average opportunity size only for the pipeline opportunities that you have won. So you have won 2 opportunities here. That is around $1 million, and the average comes out to be 500,000. And similarly for average pipeline velocity, the 28 days for opportunity ABC and 60 days for XYZ. And the average for one opportunities, the days spent in the sales pipeline process comes out to be 44. ROI is, however, the calculation of ROI in a sales pipeline is slightly different from the others. For ROI, however, we'll take the opportunity revenue of the opportunities we have won, which is $1 million in this case. But the expenditure incurred is calculated all across the pipeline. So essentially, you have your expenditure incurred in this case for ROI calculation would be sum of 25,000, 100,000, and 125,000. While your revenue, your numerator, which is sum of revenue won in ROI, takes only 200,000 and 800,000. So that comes out to be around $4. So the interpretation of ROI is, for every dollar I spend in my pipeline processes, I am gaining about $4. So essentially that indicates how efficient our overall sales process and spending in the sales process is. So this is how typically you would measure sales performance in a B2B environment. Just pause here to see any.
Yes, sir. Can you please elaborate what is B2B and what is B2C in your language?
Okay, so B2B is like, so B2C, let's understand B2C first. B2C is like Samsung selling to Anupam or Rohit, right? It could be consumer goods, what you and me would be consuming or buying as an individuals, which we use in our day-to-day life. B2B is where a business sells to another business. For example, TCS, which is an IT company, runs a large IT project for, say, Bank of America. And Bank of America, since Bank of America is also a business, and TCS is also a business. The sale that happens between both of them is actually classified as a B2B sale as opposed to B2C sale. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir, it was fine. So one more question. What is organic marketing?
What is organic marketing?
Yeah.
So organic marketing is something that that essentially does not involve a lot of spending from the company's side. So a good example for organic marketing would be, word of mouth, right? So you don't really, as a company, I don't really spend any X number of dollars to generate word of mouth. If my product is good, it sells automatically, and the word is spread automatically that this particular product is good, and it and it serves the need better. So organic marketing is typically anything where the spend from the company side, the marketing spend from company side is very less or is negligible in nature. Even social media marketing can be considered as organic marketing because the cost of maintaining a Facebook page or an Instagram page is almost negligible, whereas the cost of doing a TV ad is very high in comparison to maintaining a Facebook page or Instagram page. Okay, so that's how I've had in terms of use cases and how business analytics is actually used across B2B and B2C B2C businesses. I hope this was useful. It may have been a little heavy in the end, but the idea behind this presentation was to introduce folks to how analytics or how analytics problem statements even in sales look like. I would like to close with with some information on how typical career paths for data professionals are existing in today's world, and what are the required skills. So broadly, the career paths can be classified into three ways. You have data engineering, business analytics or data analytics, and then we have data science as well. So data engineering essentially revolves around curating the information, preparing the information. So this would require data integration work like ETLs, data modeling and data warehousing, which is a lot of SQL, NoSQL, depending on technology. Data platforms as well, the entire end-to-end architecture. A more advanced data engineering competency would be big data mining, and also operationalizing all the technical aspects of the solution, like solution deployments and so on. But at the core, the core objective of a data engineer, the core job definition of a data engineer is to curate the information for business analysts and data scientists to use and run their processes. Coming to business analytics, essentially the core job description of a business analyst is to use the curated information and generate business insights out of the curated information. So this will involve, of course, it will involve a lot of data analysis, data mining, visualization. Someone mentioned Power BI on the chat, and I think Power BI is a data analyst competency. To run some of the descriptive or hypothesis testing kind of a work, you'll have to have some familiarity with basic statistics and basic machine learning as well. But a larger part of it is actually problem solving, stakeholder management, communication, and detail orientation as well. So it's a mix of data skills as well as non-data skills, which is more around business and communication. And the last career path, or the more hot career path these days, is data science. So data science is a series of activities that takes the insight and then predicts what is going to happen next. And that's where all your sorry, that's where all your machine learning or your deep learning techniques come into the picture. So data scientists takes over from where or partners with business analytics to sort of build those machine learning or deep learning or advanced statistic models, which tries to predict what is going on with what is going to happen in the near future or far off distant future. And it involves advanced statistic knowledge. There are a lot of data sciences courses in the market, both vocational as well as full-time. And I think EduBridge would also have some. And so data scientist is currently a very hot job in the market. So it involves all of deep learning, machine learning, data mining, ML ops as well, to move from insight to prediction. So in summary, the first, if you were to look at the entire data stack, data engineering is the guy who's sitting and preparing the information. Business analytics is supposed to convert that information into an insight for business users to consume. Whereas data science uses those insights and tries to predict the future, which will enable some, proactive corrective actions or preventive actions from the business side.